Yeah, I know you can.
Charming. Yeah.
Good afternoon, welcome everyone. It always amazes me somehow that we plan these meetings and we put messages out and we sit and worry for days wondering whether anybody's going to turn up. And as always, everybody does turn up, and it's really great to see everybody. And as always, again, it's really nice to see some old faces and good supporters, but welcome to some new people as well, and a very, very warm welcome. My name's Stephen Peckham. I'm chairman of Hampshire Against Fluoridation, and this meeting is here to mark what is now becoming a fairly long drawn-out saga, but the third anniversary of the SHA's decision to impose water fluoridation on Southampton and the surrounding areas. And if those of you who were involved back in 2008, 2009 will recall that the SHA said it would be in within months. And in fact, they said that last year too. And if you've been reading the Echo this week, you'll realise that we're not even sure what it is that's going to be in, because Southern Water have still doing their feasibility study to see what can be put in, if anything can. So for us, the fight goes on. And the idea of today is two things, really. One is to mark that anniversary with our panel of speakers, and the idea is they're all going to say something fairly short, but the real part of the afternoon is for questions. And so we have Dr. Julian Lewis, MP for New Forest East, who's been a long supporter and anti-fluoride campaigner. Councillor David Harrison from Totton and Hampshire County Council, who's been involved right from the initial work that Hampshire did on water fluoridation, the County Council did before the decision was made. And Arshad Sharif, who is a supporter and member of HAF, but also chair of the Muslim Council, and myself. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is you were all handed a postcard or collected a postcard on the way in. The new campaign is, I think it's about time, with the Strategic Health Authority due to be abolished in just over 12 months' time, that we took the message directly to the Strategic Health Authority. So we have these postcards. We got two postcards, one about polluting water with hexafluorosilicic acid, and one about not consenting to forced medication. And all you need to do is to put a stamp on it, sign it. If you want to write your own message, by all means write your own message and pop it in the post box. And we've got lots of these cards at the back. We've got some stamps. If you want to do it today, you can buy a second-class stamp from us. But also, please take some cards with you and give them to your friends, your neighbours, post them through your local, put them in a local shop if they take them, because the more that the SHA receive, the better. I do have to say, I don't think that the Strategic Health Authority take a blind bit of notice, because they have taken a blind bit of notice for 3 years. But the point is that we must push the message to them. So please support this campaign and get these cards out, because I just think it would be an irritation to them. I'm sure that that's a really good thing to do. So pick up your cards. So that's what we're launching. It's 3 years, the 26th of February tomorrow is exactly 3 years since we sat in the St Mary's Stadium and watched a very impassive group of people completely kind of overrule all local public opinion. And where are we 3 years later? Well, 3 years later, the SHA is going to be abolished. Local councils, all our local councils, are now fervently against water fluoridation. And it does seem to show that the more people know, the more people object. We know, which is precisely, of course, the opposite to what the the powers that be thought. They thought the more we knew, the more we'd want it. But it just seemed to be completely the other way. I mean, there is no democratic support for this. There's no evidence support for it. And more importantly, in the years that have passed, it's clearly an unnecessary scheme. Southampton currently has the lowest level of dental health decay that it's had ever in history. It's about the same as the English average, which actually for a city like this is very, very good. Well, I mean, we shouldn't be complacent. I think that it's important that we do support interventions and ways to help reduce dental decay, but water fluoridation is not the answer. It's ineffective, it's not safe, and highly unethical. It's a way using mass medication without consent by the local population, and therefore it is also totally unwanted and unmerited. And we have to keep these messages going. We have to keep pushing these messages. And we will use all the means that we have, in a sense, to achieve this. And we've been pushing Southern Water for some time to find out what exactly the scheme will be. You'll remember that the Strategic Health Authority had that lovely map with the postcodes, and you could check to see which postcodes were going to be fluoridated or not. Well, it seems from what Southern Water are saying that they can't guarantee that those are the postcodes. Now, if that is true, then there is a real problem for, not for us, but for the Strategic Health Authority. Because legislation in this is very, very clear. The legislation is clear that they can ignore local people. We found that out already with the judicial review. But what they cannot ignore is the fact that the legislation is very clear. Anybody who receives fluoridated water has to be consulted. So if anybody outside of those postcodes gets fluoridated water, they should have been consulted in the original consultation. So this is actually quite an important point, and we'll keep pushing this point through whatever means we can until we can get a very, very clear answer. We also know that not only is that kind of feasibility uncertain, it also relates to the cost of the scheme. And we know that the SHA has already spent over £500,000 dealing with court cases, doing the consultation. The original scheme costed 4 years ago was going to cost just under £1.6 million. So we're now over £2 million for a scheme that doesn't even work. But that estimate of cost is probably wrong. We know from already Southern Water queried the cost back in 2008. So it's going to be even more expensive. And this is just an utter waste of NHS resources, and particularly when we think about a time now. And more importantly, other alternatives, not only are they more effective, they will be cheaper. And you know, this whole nonsense that we're being pushed on, that somehow water fluoridation is a cheap, effective, safe scheme, is just nonsense. It's based on assumptions. And in fact, someone from the Strategic Health Authority stood in the council chamber here back in 2008, and when they were asked about how did you work out the costs, they said it was a guesstimate. I mean, this is on record. They actually said it was a guesstimate. I mean, this is what it's based on. So I think we have right on our side. We are morally right. We are right in terms of the evidence, and those of you who particularly come and listen to Paul Connett will be very clear about that. We are right about the issue of consent, and we are right about the democracy. You know, we have got elected people, and elected people who represent us. That may be not the best way of doing things, but they have all come out. And the only people that seem to be supporting this are either officials or non-elected members of the Strategic Health Authority. So I think we should be confident that we have right on our side, but unfortunately having right on our side doesn't seem to be enough. So we do need to keep the pressure on. If the scheme is not implemented before the SHA is demolished in 2013, then we know that our county council and our city council are both opposed, and therefore we will not have a scheme. And hopefully they will be much more intelligent and clear about the way that they use resources to combat dental health. And in fact, I'm sure they will be. But we can address all these kinds of questions this afternoon. We'll try and talk about questions about what's happening nationally or what's happening locally, particularly around democratic, what people's views are. If you've got questions about science or anything, we'll try and answer those as well the best we can. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a very, very short kind of talk for each from our guest of speakers here. So David Harrison will be going first, followed by Arshad Sharif, and then Dr. Julian Lewis. And they're not going to do long talks. I promise that, and we may have politicians here on the head, but they have promised that they will be short pieces. But just to talk a bit about their perspective and probably a little bit about what they've been doing. And then I'm just going to open it up for a conversation and debate. And that's what the rest of the afternoon will be about. So once again, thank you all for coming. We do have a sheet at the back where if you want to receive communications from Hampshire against fluoridation, you can sign up. We also have the professional DVD, which gives you a lot of background to why water fluoridation isn't a good thing, which is available for donations. And so we've got lots of cards, so please take them away by the handful. And if you want to do your card today, we've got pens, we've got stamps, and you can even leave the card then with us and we'll shove it in the postbox for you. So I just hope it's an informative and interesting afternoon, and the afternoon is yours, not necessarily mine. So with that, I'm going to pass first of all and ask perhaps David if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Julian. Can I perhaps ask a show of hands, has anybody tried metaphorical toast? I thought that might be the response. What I want to do to start with is to propose a metaphorical toast to Hampshire against fluoride, because for 3 years now I think they have done an amazing job in keeping this issue out there in the public gaze. I'll just say a very brief word about myself. I'm a local authority councillor. I've got several roles on the town and New Forest District Council and Hampshire County Council, but I'm also very proud to work for the NHS. And I hope there'll be no jokes about the psychiatric hospital allowing me out this afternoon to talk to you, but it is true. I can remember feeling very shocked indeed when the plans first were announced. It seemed to me at that time that most people would get very upset when they heard about the intention to add a chemical to tap water, something that had nothing to do with keeping it clean and safe to drink, but the idea that it would be a very good way of medicating people, even for people who don't need it. I was foolish enough, and I accept this now, to believe that the health authority would be compelled to consult and compelled to listen to what people said, and they had a very strong message which they ignored. And for me, as the drama has unfolded, it just shows how important it is for power to be devolved to local communities. So what do we have? We have politicians in Westminster, and I'm not looking at especially you, Julian, who empowered health bosses to impose something like this on an unwilling population. What do we have? A remote, unelected and unaccountable health authority who can go through the legal procedures of consultation, who can spend our money trying to impose it upon us, and when they failed, they merrily ignored the results of the consultation and they're determined to press ahead. But it's worse than this. I think when words are not matched by deeds, trust is eroded. I used to work in this city in insurance, and when I was quite a low level, a filing clerk, the boss called me into his office one day And he said to me, David, if ever you've got a problem, my door is always open. And the meeting went on for 10 minutes. And then when it was, time to depart, he said, oh, David, close the door, will you? and so it is with our politicians. We had the Prime Minister come and visit Southampton, and I know he was asked the question of fluoride. It was very well publicised, and his answer, it's for local people to decide. No. It wasn't the case then, and it still isn't the case. And what kind of crazy situation are we left with now? The law is changing. As Stephen mentioned, locally elected councillors will soon have the power to decide whether fluoride goes into tap water. But despite knowing this, and the fact that almost all councillors and certainly all local councils are solidly against the plans, they're still spending our money trying to impose it upon us. And nobody in central government is prepared to intervene and stop this from happening. I know that a lot of people here today very strongly believe that there is potential for very serious harm to public health if the chemical is added to tap water. The Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee of Hampshire County Council carried out a lot of detailed work, taking evidence from those that were in favour of it and those that were against, and decided, really sensibly I think, that the precautionary principle should apply. I was personally sufficiently impressed by those who cautioned against the scheme, and that hasn't changed. But I really think that mums and dads should be making sure that teeth are brushed and that the consumption of sugar is controlled. The only state intervention that is justified for those children who don't have the benefit of responsible parenting or guardianship is targeted, effective support for those that really need it. And we have wonderful organisations, things like Sure Start Centres, that deal with these group of people, and we all know, don't we, that if you form the habit of brushing your teeth at an early stage, it stays with you even when you get to old people like me. And finally, have no doubts, adding fluoride to the drinking supply is mass medication, and it is only by means of a loophole in the law that it is not. It should indeed carry with it all the usual principles involved with medicating people, including those most fundamental principles of consent, that a qualified doctor considers it necessary, and it has an effective means of ensuring the correct dosage. So, I'll simply finish by saying 3 cheers to Hampshire against fluoride, and for the important campaigning work that you're doing, and I will continue to support you for as long as I can.
Good afternoon. My name is Arshad Sharif. I'm the chair of the Muslim Council of Southampton. First of all, actually, I'd like to thank Stephen and all of the HAF members. I'm a later member. But when I saw the great work they were doing, I was really appreciative. And I contacted Stephen and said, is there any way I can help and get involved and support you guys? So, once again, many thanks for all the great work that you're doing. Now, I want to talk about the religious principle here. Whether you're religious or not religious, that's not really an issue. It could be philosophical, you could be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Sikh, whatever. But for me, my religion states very clearly that I have a choice of what goes into my body. This is the most sacred thing, that if we can't control the substances going into us, what freedoms do we have? And many people have fled some pretty horrendous countries to come to this country where they think our democratic rights and our freedoms are respected, yeah? I think they'd be pretty shocked that you're in a country where more and more now we're being force medicated, or told that we will be force medicated. Now, people might say it's democracy, whatever. You've got to respect democracy, but democracy has its flaws, yeah? It's not some kind of religion that if, for example, all of us here vote today to take Stephen's house off him, sell it, and hand out the money, that doesn't make it right, even if a majority of us vote for it. So democracy has its limits, and I think it was George Washington who said, democracy is like two wolves and a sheep voting what's for dinner. So it has its limits, and we have to accept it has its limits. So I've had some interesting discussions with the councillors here at Southampton Council, and it's kind of funny how they say, oh, well, this is democracy. Well, it's not even democracy, right? We know democracy has a limit, but in this particular situation that we were in, 72% of respondents clearly said that they didn't want it. Now, what really worries me is this is really the thin end of the wedge. If fluoride can be added to the drinking water, I've heard arguments that we have around 5,500 to 6,000 suicides in this country a year. And 20 times that are people who do self-harm and end up in the hospitals for treatment. Now, surely you could make the same argument, for God's sake, there's 6,000 people killing themselves, and in countries like Japan, where they have a higher level of lithium in the natural drinking water, they're telling us there's a lower incidence of suicide. So the next argument could be quite logically, why not, let's add lithium to the water. Now, we know the economic situation is getting very bad. If you people are getting agitated and want to protest, maybe the government says, for the greater good, we need to kind of calm you all down a bit, because if you're going to riot, it's not going to achieve anything. Right? Why not just add a little bit of lithium and we'll all be happy, and don't worry about the fact your house is being repossessed, you don't have a job, everything's wonderful. The next argument that's made has been for statins. We hear respected doctors saying we need to add statins to the water because we can lower the incidence of heart attack. And again, we get all these medical experts who kind of with a tunnel vision focus in on one area as if that's the only part of the body. With the National Health Service at the moment, they're talking about the teeth as if there is no other component in the body. We had a discussion with Jayanti John, she's one of the representatives of the Strategic Health Authority. And I asked her about the study which was done by the pineal gland study.
By
Jenny Luke, and I said, there's a study by Dr. Jennifer Luke which shows 9,000 to 20,000 times a concentration of fluoride in the pineal gland. Have you repeated this study? And she just had nothing to say. They had a communications director in the morning in the corner playing with his tie, and Dr. Mapstone looking down. And I thought, God, these are supposed to be the experts, and this is a very serious question. Pineal gland is linked to many things, melatonin production, sleep regulation, cancer, where it's subdued, there's a high incidence of cancer, and they had no answer. Now, I think people are very concerned about how we, the population, are used as guinea pigs. Between 1961 and 1968, the Ministry of Defence had a ship, the Ice Whale, anchored off the Dorset coast, and they sprayed bacteria which mimicked anthrax. And they said nothing to worry about, and it came up to actually New Forest, so quite close to us here. And they said there was no harm, there was nothing to worry about, but people living in Bournemouth, many women had miscarriages, later on they had children with birth defects, and when the Guardian asked the spokesperson for the Ministry of Defence, are any such tests actually happening today? They said no comment. Yeah. So really, we're being ignored, we're being treated like guinea pigs, and we really need to be concerned about this. I mean, it's happened in the past and it's still happening. Another area that concerns me is the conflict of interest. Caroline Spellman, she's the head of DEFRA, Department for Environmental, Farming and Rural Affairs. Before she took up this position, she headed a company, Cormac Spellman and Associates, which promoted GM crops. Now she is going to be making a decision eminently on whether we should be having more GM crops. You know, I'll leave it to your imagination what the decision's going to be. Dr. Elise Bassin, in her research at Harvard, she found a 5- to 7-fold increase in osteosarcomas, bone cancer, in boys if they were fluoridated between the ages of 5 to 8. Now this is real science, this is not conspiracy theories, yeah? Often when we put these facts to people, people laugh at us and saying, oh, stop being a conspiracy theorist, yeah? Surely the government wouldn't do anything which was harmful to you. But, you know, it's funny, I was telling Stephen, wherever I go, I always strike up the opportunity to talk to people, and I was in a builder's yard last week, and I was talking to the guys, and they had the echo there, and they were all looking at the issue of fluoride. And one of them said the government wouldn't do anything which was harmful to you, and all the others started laughing in the office. was this guy bored yesterday or something? But anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity, and hopefully we can have a few questions later on. Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, Dr. Julian.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along today. Right up to the last minute, as Stephen said, we didn't know whether we'd have half a dozen or a packed room, and we've got an almost completely packed out room, and for that we're very grateful. I would simply like to focus on that little bit of the argument in which I've been involved, namely the interface between local representatives and elected politicians and ministers. There are basically three questions about this issue. Is it healthy to do what's being proposed? Is it legal to do what's being proposed? And is it moral to do what's being proposed? I have never held myself out to be any sort of expert on whether it is or is not healthy to do what is being proposed, but I have had an intrinsic aversion to the idea of mass medication, which has already been comprehensively discussed by the three people who spoke before me. I wish to concentrate on the other two questions in these few remarks. Is it legal and is it moral? Now, for a long time it appeared that we had lost on the legal front. It hadn't been a waste of time to take matters to court in the way in which Hampshire against fluoride did so effectively, because that case involved a significant loss of time to the Strategic Health Authority, who are determined to go ahead with this even if it is right at the very end of their own existence. So it appeared that the legal case had been tried and lost. Now, as you've heard Stephen say right at the beginning, it could all start over again. Because if it is the case that they do not know which areas are going to receive the fluoridated water, then it is highly probable that to proceed would be illegal, because the people who are going to be affected by fluoridation will have not been consulted in some of the affected areas. So I would certainly urge the organisation, and it doesn't need urging, I'm sure, from me, to examine with a microscope the possibility of now reinstituting a legal process, because that will take up more time, and it will justifiably take up more time. Because if what is being attempted were not unjust and immoral, then losing a bit of time over a legal case wouldn't matter. The only reason why timing matters in this is that there is one body and one body alone that is determined to proceed, and that is the Strategic Health Authority, and it is desperate to proceed urgently because it knows that its days are numbered. That then leads me to the moral case.